Tonight on Primetime Politics, Ottawa's new EV strategy.
We're making Canada the best place to invest, the best place to build, the best place to build clean.
Gone are the Trudeau-era mandates, replaced by a new plan that leans in on incentives. Will the strategy create jobs? Will it silence critics who say the Carney government is failing the environment? Our political strategists will weigh in. Also,
Team Canada is going to do great, and the whole country's behind them.
We'll speak with the Secretary of State for Sport as the world counts down to tomorrow's start of the 2026 Winter Games. And what NATO spending will do to Canada's deficits. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is standing by. This is Primetime Politics. Hello everyone, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, the EV mandates introduced by the last Liberal government are now officially dead, replaced today by a new program that focuses on consumer incentives. Rebates that aim to make zero-emission vehicles more attractive to consumers instead of requiring car companies to sell only EVs by 2035. And that's not all. This environmental component is part of a larger new automotive strategy, a strategy that includes the return of consumer subsidies for EVs, a promised $3.1 billion for the Canadian automotive industry, money to be used for growth and diversification, tougher emission standards for vehicles starting with the 2027 model year, and new programs for auto workers that will allow for work share and new training. Take a listen now to what was heard today from the Prime Minister.
The future of the auto industry is increasingly electric and connected. And so to remain competitive and to realize our potential, we must develop the entire value chain for next generation vehicles, harnessing Canada's exceptional capabilities in auto production, including the world's greatest workforce, including globally recognized parts suppliers and leading edge research and development.
Well, with their thoughts on this new automotive strategy and other matters, we are now joined by our political strategist. Marci Surkes is the Chief Strategy Officer and Managing Director at Compass Rose Group. She's also a Liberal strategist. Cole Hogan is a Conservative strategist, and George Soule is an NDP strategist, founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi, Michael.
So listen, I think it's fair to say that, you know, in the summer when Mark Carney suspended the EV mandate, there were a lot of questions as to what he was going to do going forward. And now we have this new EV strategy wrapped into a greater plan, I guess, in terms of trying to encourage the automotive industry in this country. Will this be enough to silence critics who've criticized this Prime Minister for not being concerned enough with the environment, Marci?
Mr. Carney is taking a pragmatic approach across the board, and that's true today as well. This is almost emblematic of what we're seeing from Mr. Carney in terms of his own strategy. He's saying, you know what, we are going to be environmentally responsible. I recognize that perhaps this is a shift from what people came to expect from the previous Liberal government in terms of being leaders in, let's call it a more aggressive manner, almost more of an activist government, so to speak. And Mr. Carney is not saying that Canada will stop being a steward when it comes to climate change. He's saying quite the opposite, that he is a climate leader, that we are taking it seriously, but he is taking a step back and saying, what can we actually achieve? And let's not forget, I mean, all of this is happening against a very different backdrop from the previous government. And so these steps may feel like a ratcheting back to some, and I'm not going to argue that it is certainly a step in a different direction. But if it is one that can achieve results in a more medium time frame and is more easily achievable, then it probably makes sense. And I think Mr. Carney is going to defend it like he will across the board.
Okay, Cole?
Sure. I think this is, to Marci's point, part of an overarching objective for the Carney Liberals to make sure that they can differentiate themselves from the record of the Trudeau Liberals. In particular, we've seen Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. They oppose the EV mandate from the jump, so I think we're going to see another point for more cross-partisan, across-the-aisle cooperation here, which I think everyone agrees is a good thing. And, you know, here, in watching the Carney Liberals separate themselves from the Trudeau Liberals, we have instances, in particular with the net zero by 2035 mandate, with the EV mandate, even with some of the Indigenous consultation on Bill C-5, we've seen efforts where the Trudeau government and the Carney government have faced criticisms for getting too over their skis and having to backtrack a little bit. But on the political angle, the thing that I'll be looking at is how do people like Wilkinson and Guilbeault react to this and going in a different direction on the environmental front? We've seen some opposition from, BC Liberal MPs in terms of the Alberta-Ottawa MOU. How does this conversation envelop in caucus? Does the PMO care about Guilbeault and the more environmental section of caucus? Do they care about their opinions? And how will that relationship, take place and take shape going forward?
Okay, watching for that. George, what do you think? Will this silence critics to some extent?
No, I don't think so at all. I think, in fact, in some ways it's almost worse. Like when you completely retract, it just feels like he's abandoning it, and you say, okay, what's coming next? But what we see with this is, this is what's next, and and it's far, far short of what was there before. I think it's an attempt to do a lot of things all at once, and I think again, I've said it before, and lots of people say it, but Mark Carney, sure, the situation Mark Carney's in is very difficult. You're trying to deal with Trump and what's going on in the world and all this stuff that's going on, but he stood up and said he could handle it, and that's what people voted for. And I think he's still in some ways in a honeymoon phase. Like he's certainly still getting a lot of credit, and we see his own personal popularity pretty strong. But I think it's going to be hard for them to continue to square that circle going forward. And I think an announcement like this just says, okay, well, this is all you've got. Well, then people can step back now and evaluate now. Yeah,
but given, and you acknowledge it, the difficult moment that we're in, acknowledging the fact that Donald Trump successful attempt to reshore back in the U.S. car production has already had an impact on the industry. Isn't compromise necessary at this point?
Well, again, I think he's trying to do some of that, but I think it's kind of halfway on all of it, right? Like I think there's some interesting stuff around the credits not being capped for Canadian vehicles. Like that's an interesting angle. It means you can buy a more expensive car, but I don't know a lot of Canadians going out there saying, okay, great, now I can afford a more expensive car because I get another $1,000 off or whatever on my EV. I think that's the problem. There's a lot of talk in this. I'm just not sure how much of it actually affects people's pocketbooks in the way that it needs to, or even really saves the auto industry.
Okay, so listen, we're going to have to see how Canadians either reward or punish Prime Minister Carney for this new auto strategy. Although I will say, as you talk about popularity in the polls, I want to bring up right now Main Street Research, because they came out with a new poll today. Take a look at the numbers. According to them, if an election were held today, 51% of decided and leaning voters would vote Liberal, 36% would vote Conservative, 5% for the Bloc, 4% for the NDP, 2% for the Greens. There has been speculation that the Liberals might go to the polls to try to get a majority. Will numbers like this, and it's part of a number of other polls that have been positive for the Liberals, will that encourage an election anytime soon?
I love seeing polls like that, obviously. I mean, anybody would love to see their party sitting above 50%. But I think we have to take all of that with a grain of salt. And what we see today, the auto strategy announcement, conversations around housing, what the government is actually trying to do now is move from a stage where they were really setting the table to a stage where they can start demonstrating results. And I think it would be a bit perilous, despite the fact that the polling numbers look good today. The only poll that matters, as we all know, is Election Day. They have to be able to demonstrate some results before they seek the next mandate, I think. So there may still be some appetite to go to the polls sooner than later. I'm not discounting that possibility. It is real. There is a possibility we could go back to an election this year. But I think before that happens, the government needs to demonstrate some there. So we are going to see continued announcements. They are moving at a very fast clip. They have made significant changes to the senior ranks of the public service. They are shifting around machinery in order to be able to implement the agenda. And as soon as there is a little more meat on the bone in terms of tangible results, then we could be into election territory.
Okay, Cole?
Yeah, once again, I agree with Marci here. I think that they need to demonstrate some real wins, put some wins on display on the foreign level and on the domestic level before they go back to an election. Because if Mark Carney and the Liberals were to go back to the electorate right now, what do they have to show for it? They need some solid wins that they can point to and say, look, let us finish the job. We need another mandate. We need a majority. But what could they base that off of right now? So I really do think that they need to have some more substantive policy wins in order to do that, regardless of some polling that is undeniably in their favor. So with that in mind too, we're just going to have to see how they can navigate this, because Carney hasn't had a big win with Trump yet, not anything that's notable. The Davos speech, of course, was great, but there also hasn't been any domestic wins. So if they really want to contend in the next election, they're going to have to put some numbers on the board first.
Okay, George?
Well, I mean, look, I think there are definitely people within the PMO and senior folks in the Liberal Party who are talking about having an early election. I think they would want it. I agree with everything Marci said and what Cole was saying too, except I think sure they should have those things, but they're also afraid of the losses they might have, right? Like there is no real negotiating with Trump, so I don't think we're going to come out with anything that feels good there. You know, the economy is still struggling. I don't think a lot of the stuff, as I was saying, like the things they're doing aren't going to really stimulate the economy. There's also the impact of the cuts they're talking about in the public service. So, you know, I don't know that people will be happy about having to wait longer for their EI or their other supports and things, or watching food safety get cut. Like once those things hit the ground, people will feel them. So they might want to get out before that stuff too. And I think you see the Liberals right now taking care of all the by-elections that they have coming up and getting those people nominated and set up. So I think they're definitely getting their footing ready if they do decide to go early in the spring. And again, make no mistake, it will be them. I don't know about the spring, but I think by the fall, I think they'll definitely be accidentally finding themselves into an election and trying to convince people it wasn't their fault.
Okay, watching for that. Listen, very quick go around here, because as we talk about election, of course, we were attending the Conservative Convention, I covering it, you participating over last week, and in terms of Pierre Poilievre, he gets a really high number amongst the party base, over 87%, but there wasn't any real policy shift in terms of trying to attract new voters to the base. Instead, we have this tonal change from Pierre Poilievre, no more bumper sticker talk, at least not in his speech last Friday, focusing on saying they'd be working with the Liberals on certain issues. Is that enough to get more people to the Conservative Party between now and whenever another election happens?
If it's enough, it remains an open question, but they certainly have to try. I think what the convention indicated was Pierre and the team taking some lessons learned and trying to do things a little bit differently. So you saw that the slogans were gone. We had a more emotive, a more high EQ conversation from Poilievre, talking about his daughter and about addictions and the problems that Canadians face on the streets. There's obviously a lot of rampant crime. So Pierre's talking to these social issues, social cohesion issues in particular, but then again also talking about housing and immigration, and then putting a new tone on top of everything. In addition to that, coming to the House of Commons, having a list of 5 areas in which they're willing to work with the Liberals, meeting with the Prime Minister. You know, this is a new foot forward for the Conservative leader to hopefully work on that base that they work so hard to establish, that Conservative voter coalition, and add enough people to finally get to the finish line and form government.
Okay, will that add more people, do you think, Marci?
This is the best week Mr. Poilievre has had, as far as I'm concerned, as leader. He did, to Cole's point, he looked stronger. He had a much more conciliatory tone, which is what he's going to have to demonstrate. But look, it's not reflected yet in the polling, and until or unless Mr. Carney has some major misstep, or if the government fails to deliver on its ambitious agenda, I'm not sure that Mr. Poilievre is going to carry this party over the line in the way the base hopes he will.
Okay, George?
Well, going back to where we started this conversation, like Mr. Carney has brought the Liberal Party all the way to right next to where Pierre Poilievre stands anyway. I mean, it's about time that he acknowledged that he's no longer running against Justin Trudeau, and he's running against somebody who that he agrees with on policy on a lot of issues. And so he had to acknowledge that. I think we'll see what happens. I think, again, we talked about this last week, but his caucus members are going to be the issue. Like, they're, in that same way, a lot of his caucus members are very comfortable with what Mark Carney's doing. And that's the real challenge for him. So it could be what Pierre Poilievre needs, but it might be also what loses him a bunch of caucus support, and that would be a bigger problem for him.
Okay. I appreciate the insight to all of you. Marci, Cole, and George, thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, a quick postscript to today's automotive announcement. The Ontario Premier was not with the Prime Minister when the strategy was unveiled, and that led to questions about whether Doug Ford actually supported the plan. But any doubt was put to rest this afternoon. Take a listen to what Premier Ford had to say about the new strategy.
This announcement will directly support workers here in Ontario and across Canada by helping our auto sector meet demand and compete on a level playing field with everyone else in the world. I also want to welcome the new federal funding for investments in auto and auto parts companies, as well as job training and charging infrastructure, which complements the investments Ontario is already making in these sectors. This is a pivotal moment for Canada.
Well, by mid-afternoon tomorrow, much of the world's attention will be focused on northern Italy, focused on the city of Milan and a town in the Italian Alps known as Cortina d'Ampezzo. Together, they are hosting the 2026 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games, with Canada sending one of the largest teams, 206 athletes in total, many of whom will be competing for the first time. Now, in Beijing 2022, Team Canada brought home 24 medals, but only 4 were gold. Compare that to the 2010 Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver, when Canada won 14 gold medals, and Pyeongchang in 2018, when Canada won 29 medals in total, 11 of them gold. Well, to talk about Milano Cortina and Team Canada's chances, happy to have in studio right now the Secretary of State for Sport, Adam van Koeverden, of course an Olympian himself, having competed in Athens, Beijing, and London, earning medals at all those games, including a gold medal in Greece. Adam van Koeverden, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you.
So here we have the games about to begin. And it does make me wonder, as one who has competed in several of these games, does the anticipation bring back nerves, bring back, that anxiety that one must feel going into competition?
Well, I have no personal anxiety about any upcoming performances because I don't have any myself, but I certainly am following along on social media as so many of my friends and some even former teammates are competing at the Milano Cortina Olympics. And I loved your accent, by the way.
Thank you.
And it's so
you're up in an Italian neighborhood, can you tell?
Yeah, nice. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of vicarious excitement that happens, and social media being what it is, I really feel like I'm along on the journey. So many of these athletes, whether they're cross-country skiing or snowboarding or getting ready for the hockey competition, it's Team Canada's going to do great, and the whole country's behind them.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on that point. I love you say Team Canada is going to will do great, because that is the number one question amongst Canadians. How well will Team Canada do? Are you willing to make any predictions?
You know what? I won't make any prognostications or predictions, as you put it. I'll tell you why. In 2004, I was walking through the airport and there was a Sports Illustrated, and I opened it up and it had a ranking of every athlete in every competition and every sport, and I couldn't find my name, and I kind of got a little disappointed, but it fueled the fire, and then I won a gold and a bronze at those Olympics. So I suppose I'm not willing to say that. I just want to say to all of the athletes, good luck, in particular to Mikhail Kingsbury and Mariel Thompson, who will be carrying our flag at the opening ceremonies on Friday. We're just so proud of every single athlete. I think it's amazing that there's athletes, from across the country, ages from 18 to 44. It's a great cross-section of Canadian excellence.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit about how government is involved when it comes to, not just these games, but in terms of fostering sport in this country? The money has to come from somewhere. So talk to us about what the government actually does behind the scenes before we actually get to games like Milano Cortina.
Yeah, it's important to recognize that they're all competing with the maple leaf on their chest and on their backs and on their uniforms, right? And they're all Canadian, and they're all part of Team Canada. So the Government of Canada is proudly the #1 supporter of high performance and community sport in the country. We invest with a whole bunch of different programs. There's about 13 different programs and ways that we invest in sport, from sport for social development in Indigenous communities and in rural and remote communities, making sure there's community sport programs and swimming lessons for kids in communities across the country, and working with our 68 amazing national sport organizations, all the way from, archery to ultimate frisbee, if you want to use the alphabet. But we're very proud that we've increased direct-to-athlete funding by 45% in the last 5 or 6 years. We've invested $75 million in community sport, and we continue to be the largest investor and contributor to Own the Podium, to make sure those top performances and all those athletes and coaches are prepared to represent Canada. And I'm biased, but I believe that Olympians and Paralympians are Canada's greatest ambassadors abroad.
Yeah, abroad, and arguably still here at home, because whenever a Canadian athlete wins a medal of any color, that is an excuse for this country to come together, to be unabashedly proud of this country, which Canadians do rarely. But here we have right now this country, under challenge, its sovereignty being questioned by our neighbors to the south. We have internally separatist movements now in both Alberta and Quebec. Talk to us about how you think sports is connected to perhaps fostering that sense of national pride?
Well, thanks, Michael. That's actually a great question, and I do believe that sport is one of Canada's greatest nation-building projects. I'm a huge believer that sport, physical activity, and recreation makes us healthier mentally and physically, but also brings our communities together and makes them safer at the same time. We play together, we stay together. And again, I'll say that I'm quite biased, but I certainly believe that when we watch the Olympics, or whether it's the Blue Jays or the Maple Leafs or Team Canada or the Ottawa Senators, if you're here, whatever team you love,
Maple Leafs.
whatever team you love, I guess it's safer to say Toronto Raptors, because there's like the Blue Jays, there's just one. It brings us together for a common purpose, and it kind of reminds us that sport is a unifier, and it's something that we all collectively love, whether we're used to being or interested in being spectators or participants. There's opportunity there. It allows kids to dream. It brings communities together. It makes us all feel more Canadian. And I think what's unique about Canada is that we have the ability to be very humble but proud and ambitious at the same time. We wave our flag and we're proud, but we're not doing it at the expense of other countries. We're standing up for what we are and what we believe in and our futures. And when we're competing, we want to win. We want to win the right way. And I think that's something that's uniquely Canadian, that we're proud of our ability to stand on our own 2 feet and to be nation builders within our nation and promote our important values abroad when we are lucky enough to carry the flag in other countries as well.
Well, I've seen your social media feeds, and you've obviously been traveling the country. You meet with different athletic associations. You meet with athletes right across Canada. When you speak to those athletes, how much of this is about personal accomplishment? How much of this is an accomplishment because they want to do it for the country?
Well, that's a really important question. I think there's certainly a degree of doing this for the country, particularly when you're on a team sport, right? I think there's that naturally, sort of like you're on Team Canada if you're on a hockey team or on a curling rink, but I competed in mostly individual sports. Sometimes I raced K2 and K4, but for me it was always about representing Canada. And as a Canadian, I took that obligation on really personally, whether it was carrying the flag or paddling my kayak. And I know that Team Canada athletes in every sport do the same. But there's no reason to weigh whether this is for me or for the country, because those people that are competing are Canadians. And you can do it 100% for yourself and 100% for your country at the same time. Fill both cups.
So what do you hope Canadians get out of these games?
You're right. It's a sense and an opportunity for a national unity, for pride, to reflect on how much sport, physical activity, and recreation adds to our personal lives. It's okay to be inspired to go for a walk after you watch somebody cross-country ski 50 kilometers. We don't have to aspire to the level of some of the incredible Olympians and the feats of excellence that they managed to put forth. But I'm a strong believer that sport's a unifier. It's a nation-building project. It makes us simultaneously proud to be Canadian, but also proud to be part of a global thing like the Olympics, or with FIFA coming up, that is all about good values and promoting our Canadian values here in Canada and abroad.
Okay, Adam van Koeverden, thank you for this.
Thanks, Michael.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer released a new report today, one that sheds a different light on the government's stated goal of meeting NATO's 5% commitment. The PBO had asked the federal government to outline how it would meet that promise, but failing to get an answer, the PBO and his office did their own projection, one that predicts larger deficits to the tune of tens of billions of dollars each year until fiscal 35-36. Well, joining us right now is the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Jason Jacques. Jason, thanks for making the time.
Oh, thanks for your interest.
So, you noted in your report that the government did not publish details when it announced the fact that it would be meeting this 5% commitment for NATO, but you've gone ahead to look at the impact. Why was that so important for you?
Well, I think it's important for us, important for parliamentarians, and by extension important for Canadians, given the size of the commitment. So, as you mentioned, there was the government's announcement that they plan to hit the NATO 5% commitment by 2035. That's 5% of GDP. We're currently at 2%. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 might seem low, but 3% of a $3 trillion economy, that's a lot of money. A lot of additional spending that wasn't included in Budget 2025. And so on our end, as soon as we saw that the government wasn't providing details, we thought that it really was important to kind of set the table and start the conversation around how Canadians, how parliamentarians could potentially find the wherewithal, find the financial means to actually meet this commitment.
Okay, and when you actually crunch the numbers in terms of dollars, you say by fiscal 35-36, this could increase the budgetary deficit by $63 billion and the debt to GDP ratio by 6.3% in that same fiscal year. Can Canada afford that type of figure?
So thankfully, Canada is, notwithstanding the current challenges that we're facing, the Canadian economy is strong. We're a wealthy country, and we definitely have the wherewithal. What it really comes down to is choices. So I know from my own situation, I got a 17-year-old, soon to be 18, going to university next year. He's probably not going to go on a full scholarship, so I got a couple of choices looking at paying a significant amount of money to support him. I can either look at taking on a lot of additional debt, I could potentially take on a part-time job, or I could cut my own expenses in order to actually support him. And it's the same type of question for parliamentarians. So we're looking at, on the NATO 5%, our scenario indicates we're looking at over $300 billion over the next 10 years. So parliamentarians, Canadians can decide, do we just want to take it on as debt, and so accept the debt, kick the can down the road and let future generations deal with that additional debt? Do we want to pay some of it off, potentially looking at sources of additional revenue? Or do we want to offset it by deciding that some of the things we're currently spending on, we're going to reduce that or cut that and instead redirect the money toward defense?
Okay. Well, you know, the Prime Minister has divided the way his government is tracking accounts. They've got the operational budget, they have the capital budget. And if this falls under the capital budget theory, you know, you hear time and again, this would be a catalytic investment, to use the Prime Minister's words. Would additional revenues offset this? Because really, the part of this defense plan from this government is to onshore defense production.
Yeah, it certainly could, and like we've heard similar words. As part of our economic modeling, and I think for most mainstream economists, and I think for most people intuitively, what you've seen in the past, so our forecast for growth in the Canadian economy is kind of based on how many people in Canada, how many people working, how productive are they, and how are they organized, and on that basis of what we've seen in the past, that's our starting point for a prediction for the future. It could be that the government's new economic strategy is transformational, and it results in the same inputs resulting in very different outputs, so dramatically higher growth and dramatically higher productivity growth. As a Canadian, I certainly hope that's the case, that you can take the same things, organize them differently with a dramatically more positive result. And certainly in that situation, then yeah, if the economy is growing more quickly, there's more revenue for everyone, including the Government of Canada on the tax side, and that could certainly offset some of the costs associated with it.
So at the end of the day, with this report, what is the thought you want to leave with Canadians? Because I think right now there's this Canadian consensus that we do need to invest more in defense. So what do you want them to leave out of this report?
I think the key question for Canadians is, are they comfortable? How do they feel this additional policy commitment should be paid for? And are they comfortable accepting an additional $300+ billion of debt in order to meet the NATO 5% commitment? Or alternatively, are they open to looking at other alternatives? And certainly from our perspective, the objective of publishing this report was hopefully to start the conversation among parliamentarians and the public regarding how this policy commitment is going to be met. We don't do policy. To your point, I'll use your words, Canadians seem to be open to doing this and meeting the NATO 5% commitment, and that's great. Now the question is, how do we pay for it?
Okay, well, as you say, a conversation starter. Jason Jacques, thank you for that.
My pleasure, thanks.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Thursday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.